what's up? You're tuned into The Cutting Room, the show where we talk to industry-leading marketing professionals about their content marketing philosophy, process, and pregame before we edit an article live. I'm your host, Tommy Walker. Thank you so much for tuning in and joining us live today. If you are here for the first time, let us know in the comments. And if you are here, if you've been watching the show for a while, let the new folks know what your favorite episode is, because I think we're having a great time. This is going to be a lot of fun today. We've got Devin Bramhall on the show today. She is the former CEO of Animalz, an industry-leading content marketing agency. And through that work, she has worked with companies like GoDaddy and Wistia and Google. So also working with industry-leading companies at an industry-leading agency. Super cool stuff. Before that, she was also at Help Scout. She was the director of content over there. And now she is the co-host of the podcast Don't Say Content. Highly, highly, highly recommend you check it out. And the reason why I have Devin on the show today, I'm very excited about this, is that she prioritizes resonance above all else. And that is in a way that is not the buzzwordy type of way. It's genuinely good stuff that really tries to carry itself. And the work that she has done has scaled out to multiple people, and I think has made a great impact on the space. And I hope to see more of that throughout, because there is a lot of garbage out there, as we all know. And Devin's trying to fight against that, and that makes me very happy and excited to have her on the show. So I don't like to do a whole lot more preamble than that, so we're going to just bring you right on.
Hi. Can you just cut that down and send it to me, and that will be my new alarm every morning?
Absolutely. It will be a good way to start the day. So we're going to just jump straight in. Devin, tell me about your content marketing philosophy and how has it evolved over time?
Don't be boring. No, okay. So I started out just like anybody else, which was following the rules. So I learned about content marketing from HubSpot, from MailChimp, from Customer IO, and I was all about, to me, my understanding of the premise of my job was to be helpful. That was the most important thing. And I would say that is the one thing that has never changed. I that was the principles in which I ran Animalz too. It was all about being helpful. I would say, God, that's such a big question. I, I believe now that my philosophy now is probably to be more specific than I was before. In the beginning, my belief was that breadth was important. And I think I probably, covered things just enough. And now I specificity rules all for me, because that's where the sort of bespoke ideas, perspectives, analysis come into play. So while it sounds somewhat what does specific mean? And it sounds kind of like, oh, grammar or whatever, but it is more of a philosophy than it is.
That is my next question here. Specificity, can you be more specific and dive into maybe examples of how specificity works and how that impacts the work overall?
Yeah. So I think specificity is what drives true understanding. So a great example is just a few minutes ago, I was working with a woman, a freelancer who I hired, who is helping me with my LinkedIn services. I sort of fell into consulting and, was going through a curiosity phase, working with different customers. And I needed to now write down what I actually offer, how I actually help people and um, provide value. And we were talking about one particular service, and I used the word growth, I think. And she was like, growth in what? And it's it's so true when you read, especially in marketing. I feel like there's a lot of terms used to communicate ideas that have not been well defined. And
Mm-hmm.
so people are making a lot of assumptions when they're writing and reading. And specificity is where you can not only truly understand something, but an article can become rich and compelling and, you know, actually give you the answer. Like, we're going to talk about this in a minute, but that word resonate, I'm like, what does that word mean? And so instead of saying resonate, use the words to define resonate. That's what I do all
Mm-hmm.
the time. If I find myself putting a word in somewhere, I go and remind myself what the meaning of the word is and replace it with the specific, like with different words, right? I'm like, what I mean by this. So
I I'm a big fan of the book Story by Robert McKee. Are you familiar with this book?
I have had that book on my bookshelf for years.
Okay.
And I read part of it, but not a meaningful. I read like a couple of pages. It's a monster.
Mm-hmm.
It's a
It is
monster.
it is a tome. I have read the book. It's like totally earmarked, and I've got like flags coming out of it. Um, and one of the things that he talks about in there, and I've been to the conference too. Like it's like a 3 day, 12 hour a day summit. It's ridiculous. The man's like 80 years old, so I have no idea how he does it, but like it's amazing. But one of the things he talks about, and you see this a lot in filmmaking as well, um, and it's really good writing in general, is the concept of words have meaning. Specific words have specific meanings, and if you want to communicate effectively, you must use the proper words to communicate that thought.
Yep.
Something that you said that I'm going to latch onto, because it's one of those phrases that we use a lot, is provide value. What does that mean?
Exactly. You have to say it. Like, what is that's like that is exactly the exercise we were trying to do. It was like I couldn't communicate to people what my value was because I hadn't written it down and gotten specifically into it. And like that's literally what this exercise was. In fact, I'm in this like marketing masterminds group and I was in the hot seat last week and I went to them and I said, "What what is my value? Like what good things do I do? How do I help? Like where do you get benefit from you know, talking with me or working with me or whatever?" Cuz I couldn't it's really hard to be specific. And it's taken me like talking to my mastermind group, writing stuff
Yeah.
out, hiring someone, like paying someone to sit with me and craft those words. And we still didn't, I don't think, like we both agreed that we didn't nail it. We were just like, this is better. So like that's why it's like it seems like this word. I'm like, well, my philosophy is to be specific. It sounds so flippant, but it isn't because when you try to actually do it, it's super hard.
Right. Yeah, it's true. And let's talk about that a little bit. Let's unpack that because I want to apply that to the process of creating content and of planning content and all of that. But let's unpack what that process looks like of trying to be specific, especially since you're kind of in it right now, because that is, I know what that's like. When I started this company, it was very much like, okay, how do I really communicate what value is
Mhm.
to differentiate? Um, so yeah, tell me, unpack that process for me of what it's like to be specific. And audience, I would love to get your thoughts on this as well, on what it means to be specific or provide value.
Yep. The very first thing I did do was go back to I'll talk about one specific service. I've been doing some agency advising. The very first thing I did was go back to my notes from all the folks I've been working with to see what they needed. Why did they come to me? How am I going to define value without asking the people who I'm here to serve? That's like numero uno to me. Just go talk to the person you're trying to help. What do you need? Why did you come here? And it's in all of my notes, right? That's in the first intake call. And so I'm basically like, why are you here? What do you need? What are you challenged by? And then through working with them, you see other things, like the things that they don't know that they know, or that they don't know they need. And I think this is true broadly, not just with my specific clients, is like, okay, first you ask, first you see what they're, searching for out in the world. Then the next step is like, see how they are using the whatever point of value you're delivering and what they're missing in it. Cause it's pretty obvious, right? Like, so in my case, I learn a lot by seeing the types of challenges that people bring to me and what they're not bringing to me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, hold on a minute. You should have been asking me about like these three things and you're not. And so another point of value for me is to show people what opportunities or obstacles that they didn't even know they needed to tackle, because that's the stuff that really, I think, levels you up as a company, as a brand, as a human, whatever. If you can find the thing they didn't know they needed to know,
Mm-hmm.
and help them level up that way, holy moly, right? It's like that's huge. But that's harder to do because if you're thinking about it from a search standpoint, they're not going to find it unless they know to search for it. So you have to develop that relationship first. So it's kind
Mm-hmm.
of that next level, sort of like, I guess if you want to use that, what is it people always say, like sticky or whatever it is, like the thing that
Mm-hmm.
kind of like glues you together with people, where you're like, I know the things you're not even asking, and I'm going to help you get ahead by letting you know that and showing you how to, solve that or capitalize on it. Did I
Sabrina
even answer your
says,
question?
yeah, no, it totally does. And I want to actually, so you mentioned search, which is something that's interesting because Animalz is actually well known for being almost anti-search with the content that they create. And I know that that was a sort of a top-down conversation just based on some of the conversations I've heard on podcasts you've been on. Um, but before we get into that, Sabrina in the audience says, Ann Hanley talks about writing to one person and using details rather than generalities. We often think we'll exclude people by using details, but in reality, these details make the content relatable and relatable to a large audience.
Correct.
I think,
That's a perfect example. That's
yeah,
specificity. It's like, be brave, man. Be bold. Don't worry. Like, don't be afraid to
yeah,
go deep on the thing you're going on, because that's what we did with Don't Say Content. Margaret and I were
mm-hmm,
like, we're talking to a very small group of people, which are people in like high level marketing roles, like you really like director and above. There
mm-hmm,
aren't that many of them. And you would think that that's a terrible strategy if you want to, build a world class podcast and we're like, no, because by talking to this small group of people, we'll get all the aspirational leaders as follow alongs, right? But if we talk to them, we won't even capture them, right? We
yep.
have to talk up here to get the ones down here. So it's the same concept.
It's the same idea with this show, right? Where it's like let's talk to industry leaders, and we have a very tightly defined set of audiences as a result of that. But I do want to say, like, the idea of speaking to one person, I actually push back on that just a little bit, because I like to think of it as it's actually sort of the Rand Fishkin adoption, where it's like, try not to speak to one person, but try to speak to one person's audience, right? So like there are nodes of people. You're talking about speaking to directors and above because you know what those challenges are, broadly speaking, right? I think that's an interesting, like, that's kind of where I'm starting to think about it now. It's not just one person, because you can get a little too in the weeds.
But also, like,
But
what's the difference? Like, what, honest to God, if you were to sit down and write something,
right.
and this is where I think, like, this is actually what I think you're getting at in a weird way by, like, which is like, if you really sat down to write something and you're like, I'm talking to Rand, or I'm talking to Rand's audience.
Yep.
How much different would the piece really be?
I think there's a huge difference. I think there's a huge difference because you're tapping into a larger set of fears, challenges, experiences. Like you're able to really do that. And one of the things I heard early on in my career, and I've said it on the show before, but I'll say it again because it's been deeply resonant for me, is you want to simultaneously attract the right people and repel the wrong ones, right? So it's this idea of, there are certain challenges that or certain trigger points, I suppose, where if you want somebody to share a piece of the content that you create, you have to know what those triggers are to get them to go like, yes, I get this. I totally, like, I want to share this either externally with their social media networks or internally through their Slack groups, because it resonates on that level, but it also is something that helps them to amplify their own credibility by sharing the thing.
But wouldn't it kind of depend though? Because like Rand, for example,
Mm-hmm.
Rand isn't talking to his peers. So
Right.
if you are talking to Rand, you necessarily wouldn't be talking to his audience because Rand knows more than the majority of his audience, right? And so,
Right.
like sometimes you get these people who are like, oh, we're intentionally trying to help people at lower levels.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're talking to someone, like for us, we're talking to people who are adjacent,
Mm-hmm.
right? We're like, okay, we're all on the same level here. And so it's easier to speak directly to them. But if we were trying to talk to like managers, it would be different. I am totally geeking out on this, and it's
Yeah.
not. I don't think it's that important.
No,
But
I
now
think
you've got me on the thing. I'm like, yeah, is it the one person or is it the person's people? And I do think it depends.
yeah, I mean, yes, absolutely. Contextual, the traditional advice, back in the HubSpot days when they were like, think about it, Copyblogger, they used to do this too, where it's like, think about it as you're sitting with one person and talking over a beer. And it's like, yeah, kind of. I mean, there's an element of that, but it's kind of like, have you seen Hamilton?
Not.
Ah, no. There's a lyric early on where it's, let's get this guy in front of a crowd, right? The idea of having somebody want to amplify your work because of the way that it resonates with them, but also that they feel like it's going to be something that resonates with the people that they have and giving them credibility in the process of sharing it. So, but it does totally depend. Like in my mind, like copywriting, right, is definitely a one-to-one, like, it's a very personal experience. I'm trying to speak to just you because you are the decision maker. Content marketing, maybe a little bit different depending on what it is that they try to do. Anyways.
Do you think I just repelled a bunch of people by saying I've never seen Hamilton? I felt it. There was a chill in there suddenly.
No, I think Hamilton fans, they know they're a special breed of people. Yeah, I think Hamilton fans will absolutely know that. And if there are any Hamilton fans in the audience, please back me up on this. Yeah, it's any theater. It's like Rent too. People know, like, yeah. Anyways,
I saw Rent. I did see Rent.
But did you like obsess over Rent? Like, yeah.
No.
Yeah. Okay. All right. You might be repelling the Rent folks then.
Yeah.
I don't know.
There are gonna be 0 watchers starting now.
All right. So let's talk about search. I want to talk about search specifically because I do know that it is Animalz in particular took sort of a different stance on that, right? The content that's being put out.
A lot of people took a stance for us on that.
Okay.
That was this became a funny thing, and I think it's normal. I think when a brand gets to a certain size, there was a point where everybody, like, there was this sort of general sentiment that Animalz was an SEO content agency.
Mm-hmm.
I have no idea how that happened. And even before, I think in the earlier days, I mean, because, well, in the early days, it was Jimmy writing. He wrote a lot about search. So I think, like, we were never one or the other. Because you can't be. If you're going to be a content marketing agency,
right,
it would be foolish to choose. And it would be foolish to specifically block out search because that is an important tool in the content marketing toolbox.
Right.
So I think like that, we wrote search articles all the time. We also didn't. And, it was more, our philosophy. So our philosophy or our approach changed based on customers and over time. But fundamentally, as an agency, you have multiple jobs to do.
Mm-hmm.
And the job that you have to do first isn't it's basically win the customer over. It has nothing to do with the work itself. It's like you
Right.
just have to win them over. And even though they've already asked to come to you, it's like that's kind of the hardest thing you can do. And so, for example, you could write an article exactly the way they want you to, that even performs well in search, for I guess, and they could still think you're absolute garbage. Like it's so. Our approach was, and this is general because again, it gets adapted by customer, but generally speaking, our philosophy on new customers was okay. We really need to show them results early on because we're an agency, and whether we like it or not, if we want to do the really good work, we need to prove ourselves first,
Mm-hmm.
regardless of whether we think this is the best thing to do first. It's like you just got to show the work. And so we did often start with a search-based strategy to show momentum. Then as a relationship developed, we learned more because there's also this thing where you have to sort of learn what their style is, and most people are not have not been trained to communicate
Mm-hmm.
their style preferences. And as you know, people get very emotional about marketing and writing.
Mm-hmm.
It it creates crazy people. It's unbelievable. So a lot of what you're doing is like calibrating in the beginning, doing those things that just allow you to keep working with them to do the more interesting stuff a lot of times.
Yeah.
So that is sort of the foundational, that was my like the foundational philosophy around our approach is like, yes, you need to do multiple different kinds of things, and let's try to start with one that shows results so we could keep doing work and not get fired.
Right. I hear that. I hear that. All right. I want to switch tracks for a second here. Let's talk about your process for planning and thinking about this more from the 30,000-foot view and leading teams. Planning to ideation to publication.
For like an article?
Yeah, just a strategy in general, like the broad,
Oh,
the yeah.
okay. And you are asking me this question as like how I thought about it from an agency standpoint, or how I would do it for a customer, how I would think about it for a customer.
How you would do it for a customer.
Okay. Well, first and foremost, I need to know what their objective is, because I'm not like, is it, are you attempting to deploy content for lead generation, revenue generation, brand awareness? I mean, oftentimes, because, okay, I just made my brain short circuit. So, first and foremost, I need to know why we're here.
Yeah.
Like, why are we here? What is your like bottom line objective? If you're saying to me revenue generation, we have to have a conversation, because we need to break that apart and understand how you think content works, and et cetera. So that first question is the most important thing in terms of how I make decisions after that. There's also things like how much time do we have? Like when do you have to show results next? Because that,
Mm-hmm.
like it or not, a lot of, and this is kind of a gripe I have, and sort of why I think that content marketing specifically, is sort of stagnated over the years. We have these arbitrary timelines, often based on when companies need to show results to their investors, and
Mm-hmm.
you sort of end up like, I think the customer ends up suffering based on that, because you end up going with a strategy maybe that like shows results to investors isn't really useful for your customer. But I digress. So I think it's like, you start with the objective, you follow with a timeline, follow with resources. What do I have available to me, both in people, in tools, in money? And it sounds really boring, but people like, I think we're always talking, or what I see a lot of times are people talking about the very end, where you're like,
Mm-hmm.
well, I'm going to do keyword research, I'm going to do this and that. I'm like, do you even have the ability to do that? Because there are multiple content strategies you can deploy based on your resources. And if you
Mm-hmm.
don't have the resources to do the thing you absolutely want to do, there's other things you can try. And that's where innovation can happen. Constraints breed creativity. And so instead of just trying to say like, oh, we don't have the tools we need, it's like, cool, that's great for you actually. Now you can start to do things that are potentially interesting and different.
Yep.
And so like that's why I'm like, I don't know, like you could deploy a whole bunch of different things, but that's not the important thing in the beginning. The important thing is like, what do you have, like, what's on your craft table and how much time do you have to make it?
Yeah, that's one of the things I try to when I consult, I try to communicate that too, where it's like, do you have the talent? You need to either have talent or budget, and time is obviously the big one. But if you don't have the budget, then what do you have for talent right now that can, really execute something, right?
Yep. Yeah.
And if you
And
don't
then you get
have,
to and then the next thing is the customer, right? And
Mhm.
so I had a company recently approach me and they were asked, it was, I knew someone on the finance side of the house, small company, growing, and just wanted some advice for their marketing strategy because they hadn't really, I think they hadn't done much or something. And the first question I asked, I was like, where does your customer get answers to questions? Because based on the tool, I was like, I'm going to go ahead and make an assumption, tell me if this is right, that they're not using the internet. And he was like, correct. So I'm like, okay, so we're not even talking keywords, man. Like, we're not going there.
Right.
It's like we are having a completely different, my advice to you is completely different.
Yeah.
Furthermore, so, the where they do get a lot of their, where they converse, and talk to each other is conferences. And I said, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say, at these conferences, they're inundated with a lot of booths and people who now think that, offering beer and coffee or like a swing are, ways to get people's attention. But now that's already a strategy that's been deployed by so many people that there's so many of them that you're going to disappear.
It's
You're going
just
to spend
noise.
$20,000 to $50,000 to be there and no one's going to see you anyway. The ROI is going to be very low.
Yep.
And I said, but I'm going to go out on a limb here and say, right, like they would really appreciate a super fancy dinner or like, the types of things, like they don't even want to talk to the masses. They want to talk to like each other because the problems that they have, they can't really talk about publicly. So like if you
Right.
spent $5,000 inviting, and you only need like 5 of these people to sign on with your product all year and you'll beat
Yep.
your goals, right? Great. Let's go make a really nice dinner. If they're fancy type of people, let's take them to a fancy place. If they're not, let's take them to like, I don't know, Chuck E. Cheese and give them this like really amazing experience. Have a report of some kind or something you can give to them afterwards that helps them out in some way. And now you've gotten to know them. It's like, George and, Mary.
Yep.
And, and now you know them by first name. And even if they haven't, if you haven't converted them in that moment, right? So like content isn't always content.
Right. Yeah, it's experience. It actually, that reminds me, you talk about conferences. You probably know I was early day Shopify. I was like Shopify Plus in particular. And when I was there, it was very small but very mighty team. And once we had an events person come on, the conference experience is incredibly overwhelming, right? Like, especially if you're on the floor. And what the events marketing guy, his name was Cody DeBacker, did for our very first conference showing was use the idea that things are really hectic around there and created in the middle of the floor a giant black box. It was literally a black box, and you would have to go through this entrance, and it was this hallway, and at the very end there were some TVs on the entrance where it was like, future of commerce is changing and all of that. And then you get through to the very end, you open up a door, and it was this nice white lounge, right? All of us were dressed in white, and it was like this, you could sit, we had a little mini bar. People would have a chance to have a bit of a break from the giant conference experience. And as a result of that, we ended up making a lot deeper connections than somebody handing out water bottles, right? And it was this like experiential content that was, that was content in a way, in its own way. We had these, and then I had put together these industry reports with my team, and they were like hardcover books, and we had those hardcover books, Future of Retail, were all out there too. So it was like not just this giant black box in the middle of the conference hall when cloud e-commerce was considered a black box.
Yeah.
It
Yeah,
was
I
this really
love
cool
that.
experience. Oh, it was super cool. I'll have to send you pictures sometime. It was awesome.
Also, I need you to know that I got recruited to like I was invited to interview at Shopify Plus,
Yeah.
and it was like the most celebrity moment of my life. I didn't get the job. They did not hire me, which fair. But I like couldn't I was so excited. And I got to talk to the CMO, Hannah. Was it
Hannah Abassa.
Hannah?
Yep.
I talked
She's
to her
brilliant.
on the phone, and I've never gotten over it. I love her. I was like,
She is brilliant.
it was
She is
amazing. I was like, this is the greatest job I've never gotten in my life. Like, I'm so happy. I don't care. I got to talk to Hannah, and that just changed my life.
I'm gonna try to get Hannah on the show, I think. But yeah, Hannah's brilliant. She was absolutely fascinating. Like opened my eyes to a whole new world of what was possible, and I thought that was really cool. All right, we're going a little over time here, so we've got the ideas, we've got the goals. From that, I imagine we've got ideas that are generated. We create the thing, right? Tell me about your pregame before you edit.
My pregame before I edit.
Yeah. So if you're like editing an experience or an article or something like that, what is it that you're doing right before you get into doing the work? So for me, it's like I actively try not to. I'll stand up, I'll sit down, I'll drink some water, I'll walk from my desk. Like what's that look like for you?
I probably do the dishes
Yeah?
or pull the laundry out.
Okay.
It's like
All right. I like it.
or so I have ADD like diagnosed,
Yep.
and I have a bunch of different ways that I manage it through medication and life. And one of the ways I found that it's really effective is to go to bars and do deep work, because
Okay.
there's something about the noise around me that helps me focus. Whereas like my house right now is a sanctuary, and I hate it for getting deep work done.
Yep.
It's terrible. So if I am unfortunate enough to be editing something inside my home, it is exercise, doing the like I'll probably fuss around the house a little bit first.
Yeah.
But I definitely can't go from answering emails or even a call like this.
Yeah.
It would have to be I would have to have a break and probably change locations.
I like that. I can definitely relate to that. I'm the opposite. I can't do work in a busy environment, but I totally understand the idea of the noise up here being difficult to cope with. I'll wear my headphones all day long because I can't deal with.
You know what it was? I remember back when because I did still do some editing at Animalz before I was before I became CEO. I used to do it on the train. So like if I was taking the Amtrak, because I forget, I guess I was in New York by the time I worked here, and I'm from Boston, so I'd take the train back and forth,
Yep.
just to go visit friends. So train was a big one with a glass of wine. Oh, that helped so much. And airports, so much productivity. I would go like an hour, 2 hours before, like even I needed to be there minimally, and I would just sit at a bar, drinking a glass of Chardonnay, and I'm picturing an article that Emily Triplett Lenz wrote once at Help Scout when I was on my way. I think I was going to South by Southwest.
Yep.
And I remember where I was in an airport editing her article because it was a tricky one. Her
Yep.
writing was incredible, but like, you're hashing out an idea. Sometimes it's more complicated.
Yeah.
And I was like having the best time of my life trying to figure this article out before I got on the plane. It was so fun. I loved editing. It was such a blast.
And shout
we
out
got
to
do
Emily.
it with people too. Like I remember Sam from Animalz. He
Yep.
was a really rewarding person to edit because I edited him in the very beginning, and he struggled in the beginning a little bit, but he was so there for learning and getting better. He was curious, he was brave, and he just like I loved to edit him because like both there was a lot to edit in the beginning, but like he wanted it. He
Yeah.
was like, "Thank you. Okay, like let's work," and that experience was just so rewarding for me to
It
do
it
because it was like,
pushes you to get better.
yeah.
I
Yeah.
love that. I
Yeah.
love that. And shout out to Emily Triplet Lentz because she was on the show last year and is phenomenal at the work. So, yeah, she was great. That was an awesome
She's
episode.
really good, but like to this day, I would be intimidated having her edit me because she was such a fantastic writer. And like, I must have had to give her something to edit at some point when I was at Help Scout. And
Yep.
she was
She's
very
so
nice, by the way. It was not
Yeah,
like she's the nicest person ever, but you're like, if you're bad for Emily, it makes you like, it made me feel like I couldn't write because I was like, if she thinks it's garbage, I'm garbage.
Oh, Emily, she's so nice about her feedback too. I thought that was
Oh, yeah.
great. All right, so we're gonna switch. We're gonna switch gears here for a second. I'm gonna run the ad, folks. If you are creating content at scale, I highly recommend you check out Content Harmony. It is an excellent tool for creating briefs. Tons of different things that it incorporates and consolidates at least 4 of my favorite tools into one, and it makes writing briefs, which I hate doing in general, makes writing briefs so much simpler. I don't endorse things very easily, and trust me, they're doing a lot of really cool stuff that, well, you'll see right now. While we wait for the edit, I wanted to introduce you to one of my new favorite tools. It's called Content Harmony, and here's why it's my new favorite. First, I hate writing content briefs just because of how much time it takes. If you want to get the information you need, you have to bounce between so many different tools. You've got the keyword data from one tool. You need to use Google to see who you're going up against. You need to know what their domain authority is. You have to figure out the average word count. What's the keyword density? What are the search trends? And so much more. And let's be honest, we don't do it all because it takes too long. Now that's where Content Harmony comes in. First, all you have to do is upload your key phrases, and its AI-assisted tool will show you at a glance the search intent of each key phrase, the average word count across all the top ranking results, how optimized the average piece is, the average links to each piece, and the average domain authority across all the competitors. And when you click into a key phrase, you get even more detailed information, such as the search intent of each key phrase, the age range of the ranking results, the SERP features, and the keyword seasonality and trends. You can also do a topic analysis and see the keyword density that you should be targeting, the outline of each article that ranks in the SERP, questions people are actually asking with information from Google, Quora, Reddit, and more, and the common external links that people are citing, your top internal link targets, high authority resources, and recent news to keep your results fresh. Also, you can get way more detailed information on each of your SERP competitors. You can see what images are ranking and what videos are also going out there. And here's the cool part. All you have to do is click any of these elements and it will automatically populate a brief, which you can then share with anyone. And finally, once you get the first draft back, you can run it through their content grader and see just how well optimized the article is. Seriously, I just started using it and it's saving me at least 2 hours a brief. It has consolidated 4 of my most commonly used tools. Now, if you want to try it out for yourself, you can run 10 reports for $10. Also, you can help support the channel and get 2 months of free bonus credits when you purchase the full plan through my link. All right, now let's jump back into the edit. All right, and welcome back. Devin, tell me your first impression of this article.
Yeah, so it's funny. My first impression of the article is different from where I came to at the end. And I was taking sort of meta notes as I went along. And at first I thought, oh, like this is I think my first note was, this is very it's efficient and effective use of language. Like it was even the word choice, the way he talking about AI. He said the AI generates X versus AI writes X. So it was very precise, and the title looped me in, the subtitle. I was like, okay, like I'm with you. And even I think it was like the intro Like I was feeling the vibes. I understood it. I was curious about it. I thought it was, um, lots of clear communication. And
Yeah.
then as I went through, it thinned out. It got a little less purposeful, and the advice wasn't as strong as I thought it would be going into the post.
Mm.
So it was an interesting, like my first impressions started to be good, and the more I read, the more that kind of thinned out and broke down a little bit. I think there's some neat things I did with the structure, but at the end, I felt lacking and a little bit confused.
So actually, this kind of, I mean, before we get into it, right? Like, it brings me to, um, it's really easy as an author to lose steam. And is that kind of what it sounds like you were feeling when you got to the end? Is that the author was losing steam as they were going through?
They lost focus,
Ah,
actually.
all right.
They lost focus overall. So there were two things. One, I don't know that they were clear on who they were writing for, or they were and they lost focus on it at multiple points. And then two, the answers they were trying to offer and the points they were trying to make seemed to lack focus, as did the overall structure of the piece. And then there's a point in the problem solution portion
Mm-hmm.
where I did feel like a little steam was lost, where there was more focus placed on the problem statement and less on the solution. And there was actually interesting stuff that could have gone into that solution that I would have really benefited from.
Yep.
And so I would say, like, there were good bones here. Like, as a rough draft, I'd be like, okay, you're onto something. You've made a really solid promise at the jump. I just think a few clarity points
Yeah.
would have made it richer and a more rewarding reading experience. Like, I would have walked away being like, yeah, I really do know how to leverage AI for great SEO writing and grow my traffic versus tank it.
Yep. Yeah, as we get closer to that part, I would love it if we could sort of like go through it, right? Obviously, but then talk through from like the editorial perspective, um, like how you could encourage somebody to get that focus back and not run out of energy, because that can be very easy to do when you author anyways. So we'll talk about
And
that as
I've
we go
been
through.
that person too.
Oh yeah,
I've
we've all
been the
been there.
person who's like, my idea, like I was so bought in on my idea and I went through it and I thought I explained it perfectly. And through a combination of like assumed knowledge, like, things that were in my head that I was writing from, et cetera. Like, I've had people read my stuff and be like, I don't even know what you're saying. Like, and that was really helpful. But like those questions
Yeah.
kind of helped me rein it in and say, okay, they're like, you're focusing on this thing.
Yeah.
See that through.
I think we've all been there. I've definitely gotten that. We're like, dude, it seems like I know you know what you're talking about, but what the hell are you talking about? So yeah, cool. All right, let's get into it. We've got this first one here. Your first comment, and how intelligent, right? ChatGPT and SEO, 7 AI mistakes that wreck your traffic, and how intelligent content marketers can get better results with AI generated content. Let's talk about your first comment here.
Oh yeah, I was curious about this. I wasn't totally clear why intelligent mattered here. Um, and this was my first point of confusion around who the reader was intended to be, because, and especially when you get into the actual advice,
Mm-hmm.
the advice seems geared towards a junior level person who doesn't even actually understand SEO. And up at the top, just placing that word intelligent in there makes me assume that we're talking to a more sophisticated content marketer.
Mm.
And so it's like, are you saying that, these mistakes that can wreck your traffic? That to me is like, okay, maybe you need help making sure, knowing what these mistakes are. But and this is so nuanced, but it's like, okay, they're helping you correct SEO AI SEO mistakes,
Mm-hmm.
which means a higher level of sophistication. It's like, I'm assuming when I read that that I know SEO, but that I don't know how to leverage AI for SEO content yet,
Mm.
which is at a marketer I would assume at least intermediate level.
Yeah.
But then you say intelligent, and intelligence to me speaks more to an expert. And so now I'm like, okay, this is still fine. This is still intermediate-ish level, which is why I personally was interested in it. Cause I'm like, yeah, I am still experimenting with AI. I want to make sure I'm hitting all these. And so when I read that, I thought I was going to get tips in here
Yeah.
that I had never heard before or that were not intuitive. And that set me up for failure in terms of benefiting from this article.
It's funny. I had the opposite take of that. I had it more. I when I read it, I was thinking more of like an aspirational. Like I'm not an intelligent content marketer. Um,
Oh, but why is intelligence relevant here? Because this actually isn't about intelligence at all.
Right.
You can be an intelligent content marketer and not know how to not know how to create SEO content using AI because it's a net
Right.
new thing that people that like, scientists are still trying to figure out. And so it's just like that's why that word really hung me up. And I
Yeah.
don't think it aided in positioning the reader for success. I think you could have just deleted it and everything would have been fine.
Yeah. And to the author's credit too, the word choice throughout was actually really solid in general. So for other pieces. So yeah, I think intelligence. I felt it was like aspirational, but at the same time, I totally get where you're coming from because
It's irrelevant.
it's irrelevant. So, all right, cool. Let's keep moving. So, if you've only dabbled in ChatGPT, or you're getting the most out of your information from Twitter or clickbait YouTube videos, you might be thinking you're about to release a torrent of new blogs that will drive your search engine or your search ranking in record time. Big mistake.
That worked on me.
Yep. It was
The intro worked on
a
me.
solid opening.
Yep.
Cool. All
I was
right.
like, yeah, I'm with you. Like it's got a little bit of drama. It doesn't take too long. So yeah, I'm with him. I'm with you.
Yeah, I like that a lot because a lot of the articles that I see, not necessarily on the show, but like I see in general, there's a lot of throat clearing, right? You got to ramp up to the P, like what's the point? And then like 300 words in, now we're talking about what we're talking about, and this like gets straight to it. So
From the title through the subtitle into those first pair, like it got me right there. I was like honed it, and this is what I mean about. It started off so strong where I'm like, I am with you.
Yep.
Let's go. And then,
all right, cool. Well, let's get to that point, right? So, yes, ChatGPT can help with your SEO content production. What's your comment here?
I don't think it's that important, but I was like, it's ChatGPT can help your SEO content production. It's not consistent with the premise of what AI does and what he believes AI does, which is it's a tool to speed up productivity versus this is just talking about generally like SEO production. And if you're going to have a stance and a philosophy, you just need to weave it in throughout. So it's like, it's not worth spending a lot of time on, but I thought that could be. And again, they really shoot themselves in the foot because they're so good in those first few, like the titles that like now my expectations are set high that it will remain as clear and concise as it was in the beginning. So it's like I immediately see when it gets kind of vague. I'm like, no, it's not just about production.
Wait a minute.
And really this is about traffic. But anyway, so not a big deal, but
yeah.
And the bullets were pretty good. Like achieving the content quality and expertise required for high search ranking. I mean, there's a little bit of issue with word choice there, but content can't inherently have expertise. Whatever. Leveraging, but like these are all yes.
Yep.
Well-designed content marketing strategy, great. Researching keyword, like you're speaking to my soul. I'm with you still.
Nice. All right. Which comment would you like to go to next? So we've got the decent source here. That's the one that's kind of interesting to me. Because now we're talking about.
I loved this phrase, like however, as AI powered quickly becomes the next painfully overused tech buzzword. Like that sentence built a lot of trust with me as a marketer because you're acknowledging that like I'm already sick of hearing about AI. You know that I know what those like that actually was that sentence oddly really brought me in and was very powerful in terms of building trust. I'm like, oh, you really are another marketer
Yeah.
because you get those things too, like the pain points too. They have solid source in the beginning. I mean, we can skip over the nitpicky one. I don't think it's that important. Okay, maybe let's skip into the first section or the
Right
next
here.
section because I think that's where, like, thematically, if I were editing this person, at Animalz, what I tended to do was sort of bucket the high level, like overall, here are the opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
And here are the things that are working. So that's how I always started. And then I would go into some I would pick the nitpicky stuff that was repeated so that they could fix it.
Yeah.
So that I could summarize that and then they could go through the comments, but it provided context for all the individual comments therein. And I think this first section is where the first two paragraphs, they don't really follow each other. And this becomes a theme where the structure of the post continuously includes sort of this like back and forth sentences that almost read like bullets that are unrelated.
Mm-hmm.
And thus I stopped following as consistently. And I got confused at some points in the beginning. So he starts by saying, as the web floods with AI generated text, more is required for your content to stand out. Like any new hype cycle, it's tempting to overstate the powers of new technology in its early stages. ChatGPT hasn't replaced the need for results-oriented content writers, though it's already transforming what that role will soon look like. So first he's talking about how you can't just use AI to make your brand stand out. You need other people.
Yeah.
But now he's talking about how powerful new technology is, and then it hasn't replaced the need for writers, but it's transforming the role. That doesn't have anything to do with the sentence above.
Yeah.
And it doesn't, and all those sentences don't string together in one thought. I'm like, when I walk away from that second paragraph,
Yeah.
what's the point? What am I supposed to? What am I the reader supposed to say? Understand?
For me, as I'm looking at this too, like I think this can be solved in one addition and one subtraction, right? So as the web floods with AI generated content, more effort is required for your content to stand out. Cut that first line in the second paragraph. ChatGPT hasn't replaced the need for results oriented content writers. Right? Like, to me, I get the idea of what they're going for there because that ties to the, like, it's a tool, not an employee. But more can be associated with web floods with AI generated text instead of more effort, which I think is the point. And then the hype cycle thing it's not even necessary.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I would have just started at, because again, we're speaking to ChatGPT is a tool, not an employee.
Yep.
So that first sentence is completely irrelevant to this entire section.
Yeah, we could X that entire thing out.
Exactly. And so here's the header. ChatGPT is a tool, not an employee. First sentence. ChatGPT hasn't replaced the need for results-oriented content writers. Period.
Yep.
As one such tech-oriented, tech-loving writer, I've tested ChatGPT and a lot. Cool, you're establishing trust. While these tools have been exciting and helpful, they have limitations. That's all you need.
Yeah.
The thing about how ChatGPT is transforming the role of a content marketer is actually deeply interesting to me, totally worth exploring, incredibly powerful,
Mm-hmm.
but not as like a follow-on sentence. It just it it felt like a diversion from the point. And so just to keep that focus that they really were so good at the beginning, I'm like, save that for later. That's something, me as an editor, I'd say, cool, interesting. Let's figure either this belongs in another section here. Honestly, I would have put that in the conclusion
Mm.
and then further explored it in another article. Maybe if because I think that's a really actually interesting thing that I haven't heard enough people talking about. So very clever statement, doesn't work there. And so now you've set me up. I'm like, cool. So ChatGPT is this great tool that needs me to manage it. I'm used to that. I work in SaaS, right? SaaS's whole job is to be a tool for people to run themselves.
Right.
Now we have this quote that has the potential. The bones of this quote are very powerful, but the way it's worded isn't striking and succinct enough to make someone quote it. Thus, it's not as powerful a pull quote as it could be.
Yep.
So I would have, because again, you kind of want to surface those as like, that's the tweet.
Right.
That's the way I think about pull quotes. Like, that's the tweet. So it's worded as, the first sentence is, ChatGPT isn't a replacement for human content production, but a supplement. It's the but a supplement that kind of ruins it, right? You're kind of it kind of falls on its face a little bit.
Yeah.
Supplement what? What do you mean? And so you really need to come out swinging with that first sentence and say, ChatGPT isn't a replacement for human content production. It's the tool that will, make your content outstanding.
Yeah.
Like something really powerful. It will 10x your efficacy. It'll make you the freaking best writer ever, right? That's the
Right.
kind of big aspirational thing that I expect from a pull quote. And that's going to make me want to literally copy and paste that into a tweet with a link tagging the person and being like, hooray, he's the smartest person alive. They are the smartest person alive.
It's funny. When I was first coming up, I took some courses by John Morrow. And one of the things that he recommended was every now and again, find those, like, write it in Twitter and then copy and paste that back into your draft for the ones that you want people to share, even if it's not like a pull quote and it's not obvious, like, because there are going to be things people highlight stuff all the time, especially if they're paying attention. And this is a piece that's all right enough to keep you drawing down the page. So, like, yeah.
We had at Help Scout, our designing and engineering team, we had multiple different ways of sharing pieces of the content from the piece.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them, I think we had this like underline feature where it's like, it was like if you just clicked it, it would take that sentence from within the paragraph.
Yeah.
Versus actually going, and we had the pull quotes that were, that showed that they were tweetable. And that was really powerful because that way you don't disrupt the reader as much.
Yeah.
But you're thinking for them. You're like, we know.
Yeah.
This is the thing that if we were in Kindle and you highlight something and you're like, 10 million other people highlighted this, we're like, we know.
Yeah.
We know. So we're just going to make it easier for you. So,
yeah. Totally engineered.
I think the story after the bicycle story, I think it's a great illustration and could be a pull quote in and of itself. But again, it just makes this quote just doesn't land anything. It doesn't land a thought. And so it just kind of wanders, and thus I walk away from it not wanting to do anything. And I think that's I see that as a missed opportunity. Like there's something interesting in here. It just needs to be tightened up so that I want to take action from it.
Yeah. All right, let's keep moving. Less time writing means more time revising. Okay. Obvious point.
Right. So I already keep forgetting where I'm at by this point. And this was kind of where, so basically I know that it's a tool, not an employee. And it can help with production. And again, it's like, I don't know what they're trying to say here. It's like, it's almost like they're saying the same thing over and over in different ways, but not getting to the actual point. Like in so many words, he just keeps saying, ChatGPT is a tool, not a person. Until you get to, so this whole thing about, yes, content marketers well, I would nix that entire thing. Because again, he's just saying the same thing. It's a tool, not a person.
Right.
And then you get to less time writing means more time revising and improving content quality. But again, like, yeah, put this at the top.
Right.
This is important. Like, this is the hook, right? You're like, listen, because you've got the header to tell you what this is about. It's a tool. You've already told me.
Yep.
It's a tool, not a person. Great header. Just say it. Don't interpret it, right? So, which means that your very next sentence doesn't have to restate it. It can just support it. And so you're like, it's a tool, not a human. Less time writing means more time revising and improving content quality and going the extra mile to make your content more useful, remarkable, or delightful to read. I think that should have been and, but now you've got me.
Yep.
You're like, between your header and that first sentence, I'm like, yeah, I don't like the workhorse stuff. Most content creators want to spend more time on the creative stuff.
Yep.
Now I'm like,
and
you did it in one paragraph.
What's interesting to me, like, here's an interesting dichotomy, right? And it goes back to that what you were saying earlier too, of like, who is this actually for, right? Like, in the beginning, it really does seem like this person's dialed into the conversation and we know what's happening. Like, there's a good assumed knowledge. But then, like, right here, we're starting to go, like, this is the conversation that's happening all over marketing Twitter, all over LinkedIn. So, like, if they do understand, and I can feel myself inside the piece, like, what's something new that we can bring to the conversation here instead of explaining to me what is possible? Because, like, as I'm looking this, yes, it's a really well-structured point. It is buried by some other stuff. But tell me how, right? Like less time writing means more time revising. Okay, cool. Now give me a practical point that, like, does that. So, like, and I'm just going to go off on a little tangent here, but, like, when I use ChatGPT now, I'm asking it, when I put a draft in, tell me 5 strengths and 5 weaknesses, right? Now that's going to give me, that. Also give me suggestions on how to address those weaknesses. And then I'll tell it, hey, edit this for word economy, but put it in a table so I can see what your before and after is, right? So, like, this is...
Can you be my spirit guide to AI? Because you just
Yeah.
said 3 things that blew my mind.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. I'm actually thinking about doing an episode that's just exclusively on how I'm using AI to edit. But
Thank God.
there's a lot that can be done. And if you're going to be dialed into marketing Twitter, which it very clearly seems like it can be done in the beginning, show me how it can be this. This is a very obvious statement to somebody who does it. But if you're going to do something like this, for me as a reader who knows how to use these tools, or at least has a better understanding of it, give me something either I don't know, or don't tell me something that I already do, right? Like, yes, okay. I'm just going to belabor this point just a little bit more. Less time writing means more time revising and improving content quality, going the extra mile, da-da-da. Yes. How? What does that mean? Show me what that looks like in action. Don't just tell me. Show, don't tell, as much as I hate having to say that, right?
Also, later on, the revising piece is part of what, I think he mentions it later on, that revising is part of what AI can help you do.
Right.
And so it's just a little, you're right, it's a little garbled. It's a little garbled. And I think, honestly, I don't think this article, as I interpreted the direction it was going in the beginning,
Yeah.
I don't think that article that I started reading needs the following 2 sections worth of context.
Right.
If I understood who they were talking to up there, based on the way they were talking, I would say just jump in.
Right.
Like, almost do exactly what you said. Okay, here. Because, like, you don't need the context. You understand. Like, I'm assuming that you know basic SEO. I'm assuming that you know what AI is and have already established, like you just said, kind of like the what it is and isn't.
Yep.
So I'm just going to go right into, Like, I think for an expert level marketer or whatever, intelligent or if even intermediate, you it could just be hi here,
Yeah.
because they don't need all that at that level, like, you don't need all the extra words and context. You're just like, give me the answer, I know everything else.
And you've got one of two options, I see at this point, right? Either you keep it where it is right now, right? It's like less time writing. You keep that and you change your intro so it addresses not a senior level person, right? Or it makes you feel like that. Or you go back into the body and you revise all of that to give me more stuff I don't know already. Get straight into it.
That's a great point. Like, this problem is solved quite simply by changing the intro.
Yeah.
And then you can just kind of keep it as is. It's still, I mean, it's still thin, to be fair. Like, I still think that this article would benefit from another round of editing.
Yeah.
And guidance. But theoretically, yeah, you're just like, okay, change the intro and it's fine.
Yeah.
This is for a beginner. This is not just for a beginner with AI. This is for a beginner content marketer who knows literally nothing about SEO.
Right. And there's nothing wrong with that right now too. Like, I just want to like point that out. Not everybody's been in this game for a long time, and there are some people who are getting into the field right now at this weird inflection point. So like, that might not be a bad thing to address people who are just coming into the space at this really weird spot. You know, it's like, I remember coming in when social media was a thing.
Yeah, and this is the problem with so much like search-driven writing.
Yeah.
Which is like, it's always like, if this article had said like 7 expert tips for blah blah, they still wouldn't have been expert tips,
right?
Because in order to cater to search, they would have had to make it, fill in all the blanks. So like, I mean, this was partly why Margaret and I started Don't Say Content. We're like, where's the content for people who know what they're doing?
Right.
Not know what they're doing. That sounded bad. Like, where's the content for the people who've been doing this for a long time,
right,
and don't need beginner level tips? There's so much content like this article out there, and I'm like, I don't need that.
Right.
I need you to literally do what you just said. Here, try these 5 things.
Yeah.
And so I think that's sort of like another, that is not a problem that the writer has created, but they're falling into that trap of like, just don't say intelligent, don't say expert, like just keep it at a beginner level, because what I need is pretty much nothing in here.
Yeah. And that's fine. If it's not for you, that's fine.
I don't think you have to be too nice about it either. It's
yeah.
Like, quite clearly, like this, and this is a responsibility that you have as a writer.
Yeah.
You need to know your reader. And
yes.
So it is actually unacceptable for you to try, like, you have to then write for that person. And so
right.
I'm not trying to make anybody feel better here. I'm saying, know who you're talking to and understand them enough so that you can actually help them.
Yeah.
And it sounds like this is a very basic problem of tweaking the beginning to make it very clear this person is beginner, and I will just not read this article, and that's correct, because I don't need
it's not for
me. It's for somebody else,
right?
I think that's like that's the fatal flaw here.
Yeah.
The rest is just basic.
It's
more specific.
It's the signposting at the very beginning. Like, you gotta signpost, because I think I agree. Like, set up who it was for a little bit differently than what it actually became. So, all right, let's keep moving. Business leaders who fail to realize this.
Like, honestly, if that's all we said about this article, it would be fine.
Just
because it's it's like very but there's more to dig into here that I think is helpful. So
yeah. All right, I like this. Like, I like your comment here. This is kind of random, because the article for content marketers, I think the writer wants to address managing the leadership convince AI is important.
Okay, so reminder to everyone, because we are in a section titled Chat GPT is a tool, not an employee. They are spending this entire time talking to content marketers, which is who they were talking to at the beginning. And then they switch to business leaders who fail to realize this being AI allows you to spend more time on quality and less time on the foundational stuff. Now they're saying business leaders who fail to realize this will be left in the dust by those who do. It's irrelevant. Like, you just don't need to see it here. I think it's, again, another thing that is very much worth exploring. Like, it's like they keep identifying these things that are really important to unpack that have nothing to do with the article that we are currently reading. And I almost want to, like, if I were editing this, I'd be like, you have found 5 additional topics that I would love for you to write about, because these are really, like, these are smart, they're interesting, they're tricky. Let's go for it. But it's like it's sideways. I'm like, what, who, why?
Yeah, I got you on that. Okay, so ChatGPT supported content still needs to meet SEO standards.
Right, and this is where we get into the real confusing thing about, like, they talk about they talk about EAT, they talk about relevance and on-page experience, define them. These are all things that, again, I'm like, I feel like you're like, the way you are, there's nothing wrong with it. Thank you for trying to help the reader, but you are talking to someone who doesn't know anything about SEO if you have to explain what those things are.
Right.
Because they're so founded. It's not like he's talking about sophisticated. There's tons I don't know about SEO, and I've been in this world for a long time. These are like things that are common knowledge.
Yeah.
And so if you have ever written SEO content or even heard the word before, and again, I'm not like, this isn't a criticism, it's just, this is a fact. And so if you're going, again, you have to be aware as a writer that if you are talking to someone with any level of knowledge of SEO, you don't need to explain these things. And if you do, then you need to change the other parts of the article. So I just think it's like, I got lost on who we were talking to. That's all. It wasn't like the worst thing ever.
This is something, though, like, I would kind of push on this if I were fully editing this piece, because it's like, still needs to meet SEO standards. Cool, but now we're not talking about ChatGPT anymore. We're not talking about AI. We're talking about technical SEO, which, like, that's a whole different area, right? Like you have to be a technical SEO. Like, most technical SEOs don't actually care about the words on the page. So, like,
yeah, and the whole thing that makes this article interesting to me is AI, SEO together.
Yeah.
Challenge. And I think what you're like, he here's talking about, or sorry, this person, I don't know if it's he or she, sorry. They are speaking about, it's almost like they're teaching you basic SEO that isn't even relevant to this. And so it's just sort of like, okay, again, who are you talking to? What is the assumed base level of knowledge, etc.
All right, let's keep going here.
I don't think there's anything like terrible. There's like some, I think all of this is just like cool that people get to see the comments in this, right?
Yeah.
When they get the article.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the 2 things that stand out to me here are great content. So great doesn't mean anything. And then they say there's one bullet in here that to me is false. So it says one of the criteria, great content should, is what he is answering with these bullets.
Mm-hmm. And
then he says, be posted on an authoritative site, particularly sites known for the topic. That's just wrong. Like, people start from zero,
right?
Building authority on a topic. So I didn't, at first I thought maybe I just didn't understand it, because I thought, if you have to only post on already authoritative sites, how do we ever have any authoritative sites? Because at some point there were 0.
Right.
That's all.
All right, here we go. And you don't know what's trying to be communicated here, and have backlinks referencing for the topics that focus us on. All right.
Be trustworthy. Linking to high quality sources to back up claims, and have backlinks referencing it for the topics that, I think he's saying have other people link to your post. It sounded like he was talking about linking out twice, but maybe he was trying to say, it was just one of those things where I would have gone to the person and said, "Hey, your writing is vague and confusing here.
Yeah.
What are you trying to communicate?" And they would probably answer me, and I would probably reply with, "Say that."
Right. That's usually how that goes.
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
cool.
So I think that's all.
Contrary to popular previous statements, Google has stated it doesn't intend to penalize sites who use AI to write content.
This just goes back to the same thing. This boils up to the same theme. Like, I almost wish that I could put this article into a spreadsheet and take all the sentences and be like, all of these fall into this category of, you know, good topic idea for another blog post, not relevant here. Simply not relevant. You know, and so I think this falls into that category. It's like, we're talking about how ChatGPT supported content needs to meet SEO standards.
Mm-hmm.
And they go into detail about what those standards are. And then something about indirect ranking factors. And then they go into almost like, I think it's important that this fact that Google and doesn't intend to penalize sites who use AI to write content. I actually think that's an important fact.
Yeah.
That probably belongs in the intro.
Yep.
That's all. It's like the placement was the problem. It's like, why are you suddenly saying this here?
Right. Well, and that goes to address whatever audience it is that you're going after too, right? Like if it's a newer person, and I think that's where we're sort of leaning towards that going to be, a newer person might be hearing this and going, you know, Google's going to penalize it. What do I do? What do I do? So that's sort of like, let's massage that fear a little bit. Because
let's do that at the beginning. If that's
right.
going to be, if you predict that someone at the level you're writing for is going to have that fear at the jump, then address it at the jump.
Yeah.
Don't do it here. Like, I think that was it. I was like, it's just the randomness of it. I'm like, why here? You're sidelining me. And I leave this section not having any idea what my takeaway is.
Yeah. All right. So I want to sort of breeze through some of this further. So we've got 7 common mistakes when using ChatGPT for SEO. Letting ChatGPT replace firsthand experience. Personally, I feel like we kind of already covered that a little bit. We touched on it a little bit.
That's one of the themes of, one of the overall themes of feedback that I would have given.
Yeah.
So we've talked about that already.
I don't know if I agree with this as a mistake. Well, let me rephrase that. So we've got using ChatGPT for keyword research, right? So as a standalone keyword research tool, yes, I agree. But I would say I would signpost that a little bit better. Using ChatGPT to exclusively do keyword research, right? Like
vagary.
Yeah, I mean, because there's a lot of like good stuff that can be done, but I'd have to.
Right, and actually, to your point, you should absolutely use ChatGPT for keyword research.
Right.
Don't use ChatGPT as the to determine the exact keyword or to tell you the exact keywords you should use.
Right. Right.
Use it to help you in your research so that you can independent. And that concept perfectly marries back to ChatGPT is a tool, not a human, which creates symmetry in the article. I'm getting the overall message sort of inferred to me in various ways through these things. There's consistency. There's a very clear takeaway building inside me.
Yeah.
I feel great.
Yeah. Let's see. The keyword isn't particularly valuable. Isn't necessarily valuable. Something. There we go. So I like this. I like that they're now giving examples, though. Give me 5 long-tail keywords related to content marketing. Keywords should have a high traffic and clear search intent. That second part of that prompt, and this is just as me who, like, I've been going about learning how to prompt engineer. That second part, it's not going to know that. It's not connected to search analytics. It just doesn't. It doesn't have that. It doesn't have access to that data.
I did find the screenshots very effective.
Yeah.
Even if they weren't always correct. Like Well, I went back and forth on it, honestly. When I first started, the problem solution was it worked on me. I thought,
Yep.
oh, this is a good structure. It's very, and the screenshots, they were consistent. They did a screenshot for every single one, showing me an example. Uh, I do think that is um, that's helpful.
Yeah. See, and right here, right? Some of these keywords seem promising, but all have zero search volume. There's a lot to be said around that. Like, first of all, it's not for validating volume, but also there's that big conversation that's happening now where it's like high intent doesn't necessarily mean high volume, right?
Wait, where are I now? I'm lost. I'm lost.
Oh, it's right underneath the first screenshot there.
Oh, sorry. Okay, yes. Okay, sorry.
Right.
Um, well, this person makes another error later where it's in the next paragraph and it's related. It says, as far as actually ranking in search results for any of these zero demand keywords, you'd still need the search results to be relatively uncompetitive and your article would need sufficient backlinks. And I thought, and my question here was, how could a zero demand keyword be competitive?
Right.
So it's just, again, and it's possible that he's trying to communicate something that I'm just not picking up on. But when I read that, I was like, well, a zero demand keyword doesn't have competition.
Right.
Or I honestly, like, this is an honest question. I'm not being cheeky here. Like, I sat with this for a minute and I was like, what am I missing about? It made me feel like I don't understand something fundamentally, because I was like, maybe. So I don't know if this could be a miscommunication or like a misinterpretation. So
I'd love to get
and
some
they also give this
clarification
other
on that.
again. But see, this is the thing. We shouldn't be talking about basic SEO and keyword research advice here.
Right.
The whole purpose of this article is talking about AI and SEO. But what I ended up finding was like they're just giving basic wrong SEO advice. Because as this keyword has top of funnel search intent, so it hardly seems worth your time to prioritize unless your site already ranks high for related keywords.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily agree with that.
So one of the approaches that we took at Animalz when we were trying to build up somebody's site authority from scratch is like you go after the smaller ones first that are rich enough in the question that they are asking that it's actually helpful
Yeah.
to their readers. And that's a way to start building actually your authority and credibility. So it's like you're not going to go from 0 to 100,000, right? So to
Right.
me, this is an opportunity, so long as the question being asked is, a common one for my readers. And I'm like, well, wait, this is great.
Yeah.
This is helping me build towards something. It's a brick by brick thing. So I don't think that's good SEO advice. But again, it's this article isn't about basic SEO advice. It's how to write SEO content with AI.
Right. Yeah. All right. So as far as actually ranking, all right, let's talk about the solution here. For now, ChatGPT is a starting point for keyword research. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's pretty solid advice. This is not a comprehensive solution. That's your comment on it. Read a bit lazy.
I think that if you're going to talk about, again, we are answering the question using ChatGPT for keyword research.
Mm-hmm.
And they spend a lot of time talking about the mistake. And their advice is use ChatGPT to start your keyword research.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm not letting them get away with it. That is not. You said this earlier. You're like, you had a solid example for how you were using ChatGPT to edit an article.
Yeah.
Even at a basic level, like, can't you infer that you should use it as a starting point from everything you just heard above?
Yeah.
And so that should be the intro to the solution. It's like, obviously, you should use this as part of your research and not the leading thing. One example is asking for LSI keywords, and then you can use SEO tool like related. This is it's too basic even for a basic person. I don't think that they're giving enough credit to their reader. This isn't even advice. I'm sorry. I don't think that this is they're honoring the reader here. I don't. They need to do better. They need to offer more. This is just stating the opposite. It's like if it's not warm, it's cold. And I'm like, I am not 5. I know how temperature works. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that is, and I'm not making fun. I'm saying like, you step it up, buddy.
Yeah. I don't even necessarily, I mean, knowing, I can see where you were going back and forth on the mistake and the solution or the, like that. Cause like the idea here, I do like, the idea of using it to brainstorm, but all of this becomes kind of unnecessary and really conflicting in my mind to what you're saying here. Cause now you're saying it's not a great keyword research tool, right? And now you're saying, actually, it kind of is. Right. So like that to me sort of, that kind of creates a conflict for me here. So mistake 3, failing to fact check AI generated text before publishing. Yeah. Okay.
Wait, there's another problem above.
Okay.
They use the word LSI, the acronym LSI.
Mm.
This goes back to that conflict, but it's minor, but we're stating like, we're still going back to that push and pull of you assumed the reader is very basic above, and now you're using LSI.
Yeah.
Figure it out. But anyway, we can move on. Failing to fact check. I mean, I'm sorry. Like once I got here, I was like, this isn't an article about AI for SEO. It is an article about how to edit, like how to write and edit, or how to do SEO and edit.
Yeah.
Like you would give the same, it's almost like they took the advice that you would give someone writing an article and just said, you need to do this for AI too.
Yeah.
Which could be summarized in a sentence, right? You're like, advice number 1, apply all the same, writing or editing principles to AI. Like, and the bulleted examples, you still need to fact check. You still need to, whatever. Like, I think it's just this, I hate to say it, but it feels lazy. It feels like this is where I start to feel like reading an article, like the person, it doesn't really want to help me. They just want to rank and search. They started off like when this article started, I felt like they really cared, but then they got into this like pretty garbage solution in number 2 that's like doesn't actually have anything usable in it. And like, it's not an actual solution. It's describing the idea of a solution without explaining to me, like you said earlier, the how.
Right.
And if this is an article written for a junior person, then you need to include the how. And even if it's not, I'm really curious about how you would specifically use AI to do keyword research, because even as a content, a 15-year plus content marketer, I'm a 0 level with AI.
Yeah.
So I could really learn from you. And instead of helping me, you didn't even scratch the surface. You just kind of laid down and moved on. And that disappointed me. I was like, oh, I thought it's that thing where you start to feel like you're being grifted because it promises X and it doesn't deliver on it.
Yeah.
And that just, I hate it, but it really pisses me off. Like that's when I would read this and be like, you lied to me. And that's why content, like that's the whole thing around content marketers getting a bad rap is like, if you're not going to actually answer the question you said you were going to answer, I feel cheated reading this.
Yeah. Yeah.
So anyway, that's just me being emotional, but
No, I think it makes sense, right? Like, cause this is really interesting to me, right? Earlier, the writer assumed the reader was current on AI news, right? And if you've even read half a headline, and I still think that this is something that could be, if the opening were signposting better who this were for, right? If you're brand new to AI and not getting set up, then there's a whole different thing that like this makes sense. It doesn't make sense being set up for knowing that you know the news, right? So it does always come back to know your reader. So
There are assumptions that are useful to make when writing an article.
yeah,
Or determinations of like, this is the level of writer, this is, whatever. But this is an assumption the writer doesn't need to make. Just delete the sentence,
right.
right? Because what I was referring to is earlier up at the top, it says something about how like, I assume you've heard it, like you've read a bunch, like whatever the sentence is, it says something about assuming you've read a lot about AI already. And then here they're contradicting themselves. I'm like, this is an assumption that doesn't need to be made, and it's taking away from the quality or the efficacy of the article. So like, just delete it, right?
Yeah.
It's like, it's unnecessary and doesn't help at all. What's really great about this section, so after this, they talk about, he gives oh my God, this is like, is this patriarchy? I just keep calling everyone a he. Oh my God. I'm like failing as a feminist. Sorry.
I'm gonna give you the transcript and tell you how many times you actually said he throughout the whole edit, but
You should have chat AI do that for you.
I just might.
But anyway, this is a super rich example and story.
Yeah.
Useful, helpful. Read it. It's awesome. It really did illustrate a point that doesn't really need to be made, but it's still, if that is the point they're choosing to make, that story was great.
Yeah.
And honestly, give like that plus the example is enough, because the other stuff in this below is filler.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's like, what happens if you use it to write an article that completely neglects new trends in your audience's industry? It's like, I got the point when you said,
Don't
I got
do
the
it.
point already. So just like, I think that's all that needed to be said there. Especially because in terms of like meta feedback,
Yep.
I would have spent more time on the solutions than illustrating the mistakes, because all of these mistakes are so obvious and basic that like they don't need explanation.
Right.
Like just the header was kind of enough. So it's like, just use a sentence or two to like drive it home and then go into the solution.
Right.
Whereas
Even
like,
if you
the mistakes,
even need a couple of even if you need a couple of lines, like here's a mistake, here's a solution, right? You don't even need to describe the mistake.
right? Because they do it really well in the header.
Yeah.
The header's perfect in this one, at least. I'm like, yep, that
Yeah.
makes total sense to me. I get it. I don't need to be a sophisticated person to understand what you said there.
Yeah. And to the author's credit, they do a really good job of their headers and like all of that. Like I can very clearly understand what each of those sections is about, which we don't see. We don't see that a lot. So,
there's just no substance. I mean, I think that's the problem, is like it promises a lot and doesn't deliver in substance.
Yeah.
Which, like, I'm not willing. Like, I have a different philosophy around editing. Like, I think this is a big problem in marketing where everybody's always worried about each other's feelings. And I'm like, listen, I'm not here to like tell you you're a jerk or a loser, but I'm like, I do have expectations, like, and these expectations are not high as it relates to this article. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? And so it's like, you're going to publish something out there that claims to do something. You better deliver, and I'm going to hold you to that standard. That is integrity and respect. It's not about being mean. And I think a lot of times it's always like, oh, but are they going to feel? And I'm like,
yeah.
what standard do you want to hold yourself to?
So
What kind of marketer do you want to be, or writer or person do you want to be?
I like that. I've taken it off. So I've taken it off the screen here because I want to sort of, I want to talk about how I would approach a piece like this. And Devin, I'd love to, if you could give me an idea of how you would approach a piece like this, that would be great. Okay. Broadly speaking, from the topic perspective. So the topic is 7 AI mistakes that wreck your traffic. Cool. What I would want to do is very quickly address those mistakes, if at all, right? In the very first part, I really like the intro. So I would try to keep going down that, like, people who know what they're talking about area. I do like the idea of the keyword research element, but then also saying like, make sure you validate these with search or traffic if that's your play. But then I would start going into some more advanced stuff, right? Like you can ask, and I've done this with ChatGPT, like you can ask it, hey, do you feel like this is optimized for this particular key phrase? Or can you rewrite this particular section to be for a featured snippet? Or, stuff like that, right? And then I would also look at it like I would start giving this. I wouldn't necessarily point out mistakes. Maybe if I were looking at the broader section, I'd be looking at it from like, here are some advanced suggestions. Because this topic is so new to this space, there's actually a lot that you can give that is good for beginners, like people who are just jumping in, or people who are new to the field, or just trying to learn about how it can help with their overall process. Some things that I do personally are I'll role play with the AI, right? I'll tell it, here's the audience, here's my reader. So you are a content marketing director within a high growth SaaS startup, and you're looking to increase your revenue by 10x this year. Your revenue is blah, blah, blah. Here's a topic on this. Tell me why you'll be searching for it, and what are the questions you'll have going into the piece, right? These are things that, like, as content marketers, we say this all the time of talk to your reader, talk to your reader, talk to your reader. Realistically, it's not always practical to talk to your customer. So you can use this as a way to sort of pull out search intent by having those conversations where it might not be necessarily available. Is that fair for me to say as somebody who like plays around with AI a lot? No, maybe. I mean, maybe, yes. But then it comes to the question of like what point or what right do we have as being part of this conversation, right? That's something that Robin Showers from Vimeo said a while ago. So that's my take. What do you think? How would you approach the piece?
I like structurally what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Like, I think that makes sense. It's like, get it to me up at the front, up at the top. Let me scan it. I love when I don't know how useful, like, I know why they do this, but I love when they put the like takeaways at the top and you can click through. It links within it. That does like the anchor link, because it helps me. This is just at my level. Obviously, I'm at an advanced level, but I think it'd be different for a junior marketer who might want to read through the whole thing. But I just really, love the sitting at the top. Love the examples. Like when I see that title, like an excellent version of this article would be, it's actually all about solutions, right? Like the mistakes are really, in my mind, the tee up to a bunch of really great advice on what to do.
Yeah.
Right? Like you don't need this is not complex enough to need to unpack the mistake deeply.
Right.
Because it's straightforward, as we saw in the headers, right? These problems are not complex. Oh God, there's so much. Okay. Where do I want to start? Okay. Philosophically, I don't think that even as an article for junior level marketers that this is adequate. I think that fundamentally when you approach a 100 level article, you need to lift them up instead of bringing going too basic. I think you need to give at every level, you need to give your reader a chance and say, I believe in you. Come on up here.
Right.
Doesn't mean talking above their head, but I loved reading articles that I didn't fully understand and having to look stuff up. So I just think fundamentally, we as content marketers need to redefine what it means to write at each level.
Yeah.
And level it up by 10 for each level. Because as a human, I find it unacceptable to settle for this level of mediocrity. I think that we need to be challenging each other to be our best and encouraging each other through education.
Mm-hmm.
And thus, your deep examples, if you have them, maybe go source them from other people. If you don't, there are so many ways to write this article to be more useful for even a junior level article, even if you don't have all the knowledge. But also, no offense, if you're writing an article claiming to find solutions for 7 mistakes, I kind of expect you know. And so using the excuse that, well, maybe they don't know is absolute bullshit. Don't either, you know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
don't make the claim. Like, and again, this isn't like, this is us as an industry agreeing that we want to raise the bar for ourselves, the people around us. And if this person really wants to write the article and they don't have that level of knowledge, then go get it.
Yeah.
Go interview Tommy Walker or Alex Burkett or whoever else is, like get those. And then that's a way for you to still fulfill a promise. You're elevating other voices. Now you're giving the reader even more because they're like, wow, I didn't even know these other experts existed.
Yep.
Now I've got a whole, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
it's like, that's not a lot of effort. Like, I'm not asking a lot by saying that.
There's.
And I think that's.
Oh, sorry. No,
Go
keep
ahead.
going.
No,
Keep
go
going.
ahead.
No, you. No.
I just think this is like where the excuses come into play.
Yeah.
We just keep making excuses based on people's feelings because we don't want to hurt anybody. And it's like, no, actually, this article should be better. And we should expect that. And it doesn't mean that anything, it doesn't mean anything about the writer besides that they have an opportunity to improve here.
Right.
But if we're going to sit around making excuses, we're like, oh, well, maybe then like, the internet's never going to be better.
Right.
That was the mission of Animalz. Make the internet a more helpful place. I am sorry, but to achieve a higher level of efficacy, you have to challenge yourself and you have to be able to take feedback and not take it personally, or take it personally and then get over it and go try to make it better.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
like, anyway, that's kind of like my overall, like, that's kind of like the highest level of philosophical. I think in this case for this article, the writer needs to define for themselves who they are writing to, what their assumed level of knowledge is around SEO, content marketing, and AI is, so that they can tailor this article for that person. I think they also need to decide what role they believe AI should play beforehand. Really understand. Pretend it is an employee and say, this employee has to do these things. I think that will help focus the material they're in. It will help them better define what the example should be. And it will also help them provide solutions that are very rich.
Yeah.
And consistent. And now as the reader, if they have those kinds of baseline levels of understanding, they have a thing that focuses themselves. And then me as a reader, I walk away with more than just tactics. I have this sort of bigger understanding that, oh, AI is a tool for me that can really help, specifically as it relates to SEO, because that's what the article is about.
Mm-hmm.
It can help me with keyword research and these 4 other things. And I also have the tools for how specifically it can do those things.
Yep.
With examples and these amazing people who had the ideas and
and how it fits into the workflow and the organization and all of that too. Yeah.
Yep. And I think those foundational things fix all the nitpicky things, or most of the nitpicky things.
Yeah.
That I had in there. It's just like, and that would be, but to me, these were times at Animalz where I was really like, that kind of overall feedback at the top.
Mm-hmm.
The folks that I used to work with found very helpful because they're like, oh, you're sort of centering them and you're giving them a path forward.
Yep.
That's what the summarized feedback at the top, my goal with it always was like, I don't want to sit here and tell you fucked up.
Right.
I want to open a gate into a pasture. That's my only goal.
Yeah.
And I think the overall thing says, hey, here's how to level set you. I give you some, the detailed feedback within the article is typically meant to be illustrative.
Yep.
So they can really see, oh, that's what you mean by that. They can connect the individual feedback to the overall, and they're like, I know what to do.
Right.
That should be the takeaway. I know exactly what to do. And your first thought isn't, oh, I feel bad about myself. They're like, thank you.
Yep.
I'm on it, right? They should feel inspired, excited, and ready to go because they're like, because writing is hard. You get caught in the weeds. I do all the time. I start writing and I'm like, oh, where am I anyway? Right? I can't wait to hand it over to someone objective to be like, where was I going with this?
Yeah.
And when they hand it back to me, I'm like, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Yeah.
I will be back to you with the,
And
so
there's always something to be said too about the relationship between the editor and the author. And one of the things that's kind of difficult about this show and the format is that there isn't that relationship in place. So sometimes we can come off as maybe a little harsher than if it were somebody that we would be working with purposefully, right? But I think that there is something to be said about that. But also, if you are the editor, you also have to hold yourself to that standard, because the writer might not always get it. So like you have to, always maybe be just a step ahead. And if not, then...
I also call a little bit of BS on that.
Oh, really?
If you're listening to anything we're saying and think it's harsh, then...
Well, yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I'm like, this isn't harsh. This is just what it takes to make something that's even just worthy or worthwhile.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm really pushing on this for a reason. Because I think that we've become a little bit too sensitive. And you like if you were in a research field, if you were a scientist,
Yep.
nobody would be saying, well, I know this might make you like, let me deliver this feedback to you in the nicest way possible. It's like, your experiment didn't work.
Oh. Let me rephrase, right? If what I'm saying is, if we're delivering this kind of feedback to people we know, right, to our authors, that's a very different type of thing. If you're watching the show and you're thinking, well, that's a little harsh, that's kind of the point. Like, that's how different people deliver feedback, right?
Also, clarity is so important in
Right.
editing. And so if you have to spend all of your time massaging text to make sure the person doesn't feel bad,
Yeah. No, I don't believe in that.
That person needs to have a different kind of education.
Yeah.
You cannot, the intent is not to be mean, is not to,
Right.
insult the person, but you need to be able to be direct.
Be direct.
And
Yep.
just say what it is. And it is hard. I have received feedback in the most horrific, humiliating ways possible throughout my entire career.
Same.
I have also received well-intentioned, respectful, direct feedback.
Mm-hmm.
That still felt hard.
Yep.
Not as hard as the humiliating stuff, but that still felt hard. But I understood that the intent was, we're both here to make this better.
Right.
You got some things right. You got some things you need to work on. And you got some things wrong, actually.
Yeah.
You missed the mark here. And I'm like, you know what I mean? You're like,
Yeah.
But eventually, you shake that off and you're like, oh yeah, you're right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you keep going,
I've had editors who I literally have my head on the table afterwards going like, I can't get it right. But you have to have, as the editor, you have to have those standards, right? That's really what it comes down to. And as the author, you have to want to write to those standards. And then ideally you get to the point where you're both pushing each other, right? Like, as the editor, you should always be trying to find something wrong. You should always be looking to make the piece as good as possible, and never accept the first draft, even if it's the best piece in the world. Yeah. Find something wrong.
One of my favorite content managers that I worked with early on was, this person had a lot of work to do.
Mm-hmm.
It took a lot to get the piece there and multiple revisions. And I loved working with them because they were curious. They continued, they really wanted to get better.
Yeah.
And it took me working with them. It took one of our other editors working with them, and they got better.
Yeah.
And you just have to keep trying and keep at it. And it didn't matter that the pieces never really, for a long time didn't end up exactly where they could be,
Yeah.
or what the highest level of that they could be, right? Because I'm like, you just really care,
Yeah.
and you're able to take that feedback, sit with it, and they even push back sometimes, or they would ask questions, or like, wait, and so it's not that they just like ate the feedback and did it.
Right.
Like this was a back and forth, but man, it was so rewarding. It's like they were hungry. They
Yeah.
saw this as a ticket to become best in class, or even just better. You don't even have to become best in class, honestly.
Yeah.
Be average, especially right now. I think a lot, like I would actually toss the editor as like a role entirely now and put it more as like a creative director role, because all that technical editing stuff that people are still doing means absolutely nothing in terms of like the readability and performance of a post. And so like, let's just like relax on grammar and punctuation and a lot of this, like, you know what I mean? And get more creative. But
Yeah.
I think that like any kind of person guiding you in content creation of any kind, whether it's like, the words, the design, etc., it's like that person. I've worked with some of the most, some tough people, and it wasn't easy, but man, it was so fun.
Yeah, some of the most rewarding experiences I've had as an author are the people who pushed as hard as possible because they saw the potential. They see the potential in the piece, and then they want to like make it better. All right, we do have to wrap it up though. So thank you so much, Devin. I mean, we could talk
Remember
about
when
this.
I said this was going to be what time this was going to end?
Yeah, yeah. Because we've been on for almost an hour now, and just the editing portion. I could do this with you all day, really, honestly. But we do have to wrap it up. So I do want to say thank you so much, Devin, for coming on. If you are watching still, thank you. Go to thecontentstudio.com/the-vault, and you can get access to this and many of the other edited documents that our guests from before have put out there. Also, huge shout out to Content Harmony. If you are in the market for building better briefs, highly recommend this tool. Fantastic, fantastic. It has saved me at least 2 hours per brief that I write. So, yeah, that's really it. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a great rest of the day. Thanks so much for watching. If you like that episode, please leave a comment and a like down below. And if you want to be notified about future episodes, please go to thecontentstudio.com/thecuttingroom, enter your email address. You'll also get replays and other exclusive bonuses. Thanks again, and we'll see you in the next one.